If one day we discover that extraterrestrial life is not unfamiliar to us, and that its appearance has already been described countless times by humans, then the question arises, are we seeing aliens, or some kind of beings that have visited Earth long ago? In 2009, at La Silla Observatory in Chile, astronomers confirmed a potentially habitable orbiting a star known as Gliese 667c. It was named Gliese 667Cc. It is a super-Earth-sized terrestrial planet, stably located within the so-called habitable zone. Although there is still no direct evidence of life there, scientists can already infer from its physical conditions what life there might look like. If it truly exists, when we imagine extraterrestrial life, one key premise is this: a planet's environment determines the form of life. For example, on a planet larger than Earth, because gravity would be stronger, complex life forms would tend to evolve shorter and sturdier bodies. Such a body shape is more stable and less prone to injury. Their appearance would likely be completely different from life on Earth. If life really exists on Gliese 667Cc, then those life forms would most likely live in an environment of near-eternal darkness. Such a world, in order to see their evolutionary path, might resemble that of owls on Earth, with extremely large eyes to capture as much faint light as possible. But their visual system might not simply mean having larger eyes. These life forms would very likely evolve a compound eye structure more like that of insects, capable of perceiving different bands of the spectrum, and perhaps even directly detecting heat signals. This would mean that the world they see could be completely different from the way humans experience vision. And in ancient astronaut theory, this kind of speculation about extraterrestrial life has intriguing similarities to descriptions found in so-called alien abduction cases. Many witnesses, with no connection to one another, gave strikingly similar descriptions: about 1.2 meters tall, small, thin bodies, abnormally large heads, and large black eyes. If we take into account a stronger gravitational environment, 6-foot-tall creatures would be almost impossible. Then this small body type, huge head, and highly developed visual system. The image of the gray alien happens to match the traits of life that would evolve on a high. So a bold question emerges: could that habitable planet, orbiting the red dwarf Gliese 667c, actually be what UFO circles call? In ancient astronaut theory, Gliese 667c is only one of many potentially habitable worlds discovered in recent years. These planets may be the true places of origin of the extraterrestrial visitors seen in modern sightings, and even in ancient myths and legends. And humanity's attempts to actively approach these unknown worlds actually began decades ago. On July 20, 1976, a probe from Earth, after a 10-month interplanetary journey, successfully landed on the surface of Mars. Viking 1 had officially reached its destination. In the eyes of NASA scientists, this was a historic milestone. For the first time in history, the United States had sent a probe that truly reached another planet. Viking was the first spacecraft to attempt a soft landing on Mars, and also it prefers to give humanity a direct sense of the real environment on the Martian surface. When scientists saw the photos transmitted back from Mars, many of them were stunned. The landscape looked almost exactly like deserts on Earth, even resembling Death Valley in the United States. Some joked that they almost expected to see a miner walk over the horizon the next second. Of course, scientists knew very well that finding clear signs of life on Mars was in itself extremely unlikely. But what truly complicated matters was that Vikings for life detection experiments performed on Martian soil returned results that were both astonishing and highly controversial. Dr. Gilbert Levin was the designer of one of the key experiments. The principle of his experiment was simple. If microorganisms existed, they would breathe, just like you and me, and release carbon dioxide. So the research team took a small sample of Martian soil, placed it in a sealed container, and monitored it continuously for 7 days to see whether any gas would be produced. The result showed that the experiment produced a positive response. According to NASA's pre-approved criteria at the time, that result was equivalent to detecting life. Another equally important experiment, designed to detect organic matter on the Martian surface, returned a negative result. Dr. Levin pointed out, because the sensitivity of that organic detection test was far inferior to his own experiment. That instrument required at least 3 million bacteria in a small soil sample before it could detect signs of life. His experiment, by contrast, needed only 30 bacteria. That created an enormous sensitivity gap. Dr. Levin immediately stated at the time that both results could absolutely be true at once. Life might indeed exist on Mars, but in numbers so small that the organic analyzer simply could not detect it. But NASA ultimately adopted. They chose the conclusion that no organic matter had been found. The scene shifts to Geneva, Switzerland. On October 8, astronomers Michel Mayor and Didier were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for discovering the first exoplanet in 1992. Since then, humanity has confirmed and classified, and that number continues to grow every day. We can even do a simple astronomical thought experiment. Go outside tonight, look up at the stars in the night sky, and on average, has at least one planet orbiting it, and roughly 1 out of every 20 stars has a planet with Earth-like conditions. So when you look up at the stars, you should also realize one fact. Perhaps, at this very moment, somewhere in the universe, someone is also looking up at you. In 2021, NASA would launch the James Webb Space Telescope, an observatory believed capable of doing what was once impossible. It would be able to capture, unlike previous telescopes, James Webb would operate mainly in the infrared spectrum, analyzing infrared light from to search for potential signs of life. But when we truly see other worlds, and perhaps even the beings that live there, what exactly will we see? I believe the real shock humanity is about to face is that we will eventually prove that there really are life-bearing exoplanets in the universe, and among them, there may very well be civilizations, and even capable of reaching our solar system. This would trigger a global transformation of thought, not only in the scientific world, but also as a profound challenge to religious systems. If astronomers truly discover an exoplanet with intelligent life, would those alien life forms look unfamiliar to us at all? Might they resemble the gods described in ancient mythology, with an amphibian-like humanoid structure, or would they confirm the recurring image? Small bodies, gray skin, and large eyes. Is it possible that those so-called visitors actually come from worlds extremely similar to Earth, and therefore look astonishingly like us? In ancient astronaut theory, the mainstream view holds that certain extraterrestrial beings from beyond the solar system once had contact with human society, and even interfered with our genetic structure. In other words, they were not merely visitors. To some extent, they created human beings, who resembled them in appearance. For humanity, carries extremely far-reaching implications. Perhaps we are standing on the threshold of a major discovery. The scene shifts to Cape Canaveral, Florida. On August 20, 1975, the United States launched a Titan rocket, carrying the Viking probe into space. Viking began a journey of 420 million miles, heading toward one of the most striking planets in the night sky, Mars. If all went well, 11 months later, this unmanned probe would reach the Martian surface and search for evidence of life. At the time, mainstream science generally believed that Mars was very likely a dead planet because of its extreme temperature fluctuations and very high levels of solar radiation. So the question is, if that was the case, why would NASA invest as much as $1 billion to explore such a planet? The night sky itself has always held, to the naked eye, Mars stands out, especially, aside from the moon, it is almost the most conspicuous object in the night sky. Therefore, since ancient times, it has been an object of human awe, imagination, and worship. Religious systems are often closely tied. Humanity has always looked upward, wondering whether intelligent life exists there, or what some might call gods. Humanity's dream that life exists on Mars can almost be traced back. At that time, people could only observe the sky with the naked eye, and Mars was among the most striking of all celestial objects. We now know that in terms of physical conditions, Mars is actually quite similar to Earth. By contrast, although Venus is closer to Earth in size and gravity, it is in fact a true hell world in the solar system. Mars, on the other hand, has always been seen. One of the earliest civilizations was ancient Egypt. As early as 1534 BC, Egyptian astronomers had already marked Mars on one of humanity's earliest star maps of the cosmos. 250 years later, they also depicted Mars on the ceiling of the tomb of Seti I. Yet not all ancient civilizations. Many cultures instead feared it because they associated the red planet, destruction, and war. Some anthropologists believe this is because Mars's color resembles blood spilled on the battlefield. For this reason, the tradition of linking Mars with a god of war has a very long history. The ancient Greeks named the planet after Ares. The Romans called it Mars, which was also the name of their war god. Rome itself was a civilization, famous for military expansion. So, this worship of Mars was closely tied to the powerful legions, forming a highly coherent symbolic system. The scene shifts to Egypt in 1850. The French Egyptologist, Auguste Mariette, was tasked with finding and recovering ancient manuscripts. During one expedition, he noticed an unusual object protruding from the sand. Out of curiosity, Mariette ordered the surrounding sand to be cleared away, and several massive stones were revealed, apparently sealing some kind of underground entrance. After using explosives to remove them, he finally entered a vast underground burial complex. This site later came to be known as the In April 2018, ancient astronaut theorist Giorgio and Egyptian scholar Rami Rahmani visited this extremely mysterious site together. This was the name Serapeum comes from Serapis, and Serapis itself was a deity formed by combining the Egyptian sacred bull Apis with the Greek concept of Osiris. Beneath the desert lies an underground passage, 790 feet long, Along both sides of the corridor is a row of niches carved from limestone, and within those niches stand 24 enormous stone sarcophagi, neatly arranged. All of these sarcophagi are made of granite. Each is about 13 feet long, about 7.5 feet wide, and over 10 feet high. But the question is, how exactly did the ancient Egyptians transport such massive granite sarcophagi into such a deep underground space? To this day, that question still has no answer. Equally mysterious is the true purpose of these sarcophagi. Giorgio exclaimed, "Just look at this. We're already out of breath, just from walking to the innermost chamber. And yet they moved structures this heavy down here." The sarcophagus boxes themselves weigh between 70 and 75 tons, while their lids weigh between 20 and 25 tons. That is exactly what makes this place and most perplexing places on Earth. When people truly stand beside these sarcophagi, or even walk directly beneath them, the sense of shock is indescribable. Giorgio said that he had read countless materials about them before, and seen many photos, but standing there in person was a completely different experience. According to traditional Egyptology, these sarcophagi were used to hold the remains of the sacred Apis bulls. But the problem is, out of all the sarcophagi, only one ever contained animal remains. All the others were empty. Therefore, the true function of these sarcophagi remains highly controversial to this day. According to legend, the birth of the first Apis bull came from a beam of light from the sky. It descended from heaven and struck the mother cow, thereby giving birth to the sacred Apis bull. This also means that the Apis bull had some important connection with the sky and the stars. That idea seems to be reinforced further. The interior polish of the sarcophagi is nearly at a modern industrial level. One glance at the edges is enough to see that they are almost perfect 90-degree angles. Cutting limestone is not difficult, but to cut granite with such precision and polish it on this scale is an entirely different level of difficulty. Even today, this level of craftsmanship remains astonishing. The inscriptions on the sarcophagi are equally important. In the belief system of ancient Egypt, a so-called false door was a passage through which the soul could move. The Ki life force and the Ba spirit traveled back and forth between the body and the afterlife. These hieroglyphic texts were meant to ensure that the Apis bull could be resurrected in the afterlife and exist in the heavens together with Osiris. In 1850, when the French archaeologist Auguste Mariette first excavated this underground structure, he found a that clearly marked the name of this place. That name also derives from the god Serapis, a composite deity, blending the Egyptian cult of the Apis bull with Greek divine imagery. Later this religion came to be called the cult of Apis, and it can be traced all the way back to Egypt's earliest dynastic period, even to the first pharaohs of the first dynasty. The worship of the Apis bull was extremely widespread in Egypt, spanning more than 5,000 years of history. The first king of Egypt's first dynasty, King Me, unified Upper and Lower Egypt, and often used the image of a bull to symbolize his royal authority. Historical records state that Menes was regarded as the first human pharaoh, ruling around 3200 BC, and before the reign of Menes. Ancient Egyptian written records say that Egypt was ruled by gods, and that these gods had once truly lived among humans. After the gods departed, Menes was believed to have inherited the throne from the god King Horus. For the ancient Egyptians, Horus was not an abstract concept, but a real being of flesh and blood. The Egyptians believed that they had once lived with the physical forms of the gods, or even with some kind of beings from beyond the sky. After the rule of Horus ended, the ancient Egyptians recorded that the gods no longer lived among humans, but they still continued to influence the world of the living, and one of the important mediators between the world of the gods and the world of humans was the Apis bull. In many ways, the Apis bull was seen as the embodied link between this world and the world of the stars. So the question is, was the set connected to some kind of celestial intelligence or extraterrestrial beings? Precisely because it was associated with the Apis bull. What do these underground structures truly represent? Were they built more than 5,000 years ago? And do they bear some connection to visitors from other worlds? Ancient astronaut theory holds that one key clue may lie in the dimensions of these sarcophagi. Normally, when people think of a sarcophagus, they do not imagine anything so enormous, but the sarcophagi in the stand nearly 3 meters high and close to 6 meters long. These dimensions clearly do not fit the burial needs of an Apis bull. In traditional Egyptian sarcophagus construction, the coffin was usually made to fit the body inside as closely as possible, in order to preserve it better. But here, the sarcophagi are far larger than the Apis bull itself. This leads to a bold speculation. Perhaps what was originally placed in these sarcophagi was not an Apis bull at all. Some ancient astronaut theorists believe that to understand the true purpose, we must look about 400 miles south of Egypt to another archaeological site in 1929. In 1929, the British archaeologist Sir Robert Mont conducted an excavation in Egypt and made a remarkable discovery at a place called Bun. There too, large sarcophagi similar to those at the Serapeum were found. People discovered gigantic remains in the form of a sacred bull. At first, archaeologists thought they had finally found a complete API's bull body. However, when the sarcophagus was opened, everyone was shocked. Inside was not a complete body, but a mass of black material, giving off a strong, pungent odor, mixed with large quantities of crushed bone fragments. In ancient Egyptian culture, this would have been absolutely unacceptable. In the Egyptian religious worldview, no corpse could be destroyed. It had to be preserved whole as a mummy. Only in this way could the soul be resurrected in the afterlife. The Egyptians mummified not only humans, but also birds, dogs, bulls, and other animals, precisely because they believed that only if the body was preserved intact could rebirth in the next life be possible. For this reason, the Serapeum has become one of the most puzzling places on Earth. That not only in Egypt, on the entire planet, there is no second site quite like it. The Serapeum is a massive underground complex, located in Saqqara, Egypt, south of the Giza Pyramid complex. Inside are about 20 enormous underground chambers, and in each chamber sits one of these oversized granite sarcophagi. The bases of these sarcophagi weigh between 70 and 75 tons, while the lids weigh between 20 and 25 tons, bringing the total weight close to 100 tons. What is even harder to understand is their workmanship. It is almost perfect, highly polished surfaces, sharp edges, and precise construction. Even now, all of this cannot be fully explained. Around 450 BC, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus, during his visit to Egypt, mentioned that these giant sarcophagi were used to hold the remains of the API's bulls. The name Serapeum comes from the French explorer Mariette, who referred to this site. Serapis was a Hellenistic deity, formed by the merging of two important ancient Egyptian gods, Osiris, god of the underworld, and the API's sacred bull, symbol of divine power. Yet inside these giant sarcophagi, what was found was not intact remains, but deliberately crushed bone fragments from different animals. And that is exactly where the problem lies. In the ancient Egyptian religious system, destroying a mummy, and utterly unacceptable, a body had to be preserved intact. Even an animal had to be made into a complete mummy. So in my view, whatever had once been buried in these sarcophagi, the ancient Egyptians clearly did not want those beings to obtain an afterlife, or to be resurrected. So the question becomes, could the API's sacred bull have been something other than an ordinary holy animal as we understand it, perhaps an anomalous being, or even artificially created?